On the day of my son's 10th birthday party, my younger brother posted on his social media. He was holding my son's hand with one arm and had his other arm around my wife's waist. He looked incredibly happy, being surrounded by the people I love most. This is what true happiness feels like, the caption read. I left a comment right under the post. Since you love them so much, you can have them both. A second later, my phone rang. It was my wife, Nathaniel Sterling. What is wrong with you? Vivian screamed. Why are you starting drama on Xavier's post? You know he suffers from severe depression. When my son Leo finally came home, he kicked me hard in the shin. I hate you, Dad, he yelled. You're a bully. You made Uncle Xavier cry. My heart turned to ice. I didn't argue. I just threw their bags out and pushed them toward the door. From this moment on, I'm done with both of you. We're finished. Along with Vivian and Leo, I threw a signed set of divorce papers out the door. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was the result of a heart that had finally been pushed too far. Today was my son's birthday. My wife had offered to pick him up from school early. Leo loves slow-roasted herb chicken. She told me before she left. Make sure you don't mess it up. I spent hours in the kitchen. My fingers were red and sore from prepping the fresh ingredients. I looked at the feast on the table, waiting for them to come home. I remembered Leo saying last month that he wanted the new Technic Lego set. I placed the gift right by the front door so it would be the first thing he saw. But 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8 o'clock. There was no sign of them. I called Vivian over and over, but she didn't pick up. Half an hour later, I saw Xavier's post. They were at the Grand Sapphire Hotel. My parents were there too. All 5 of them were smiling in a perfect family photo. One photo in particular felt like a knife to the chest. Xavier was holding my son's hand and leaning into my wife. They looked like the perfect little family. I realized then that in this family, I was the only outsider. I was the biological son who had been lost for years. My foster parents died young, and I grew up in a harsh orphanage. I worked my way through a top university on my own. It was only by pure luck that my biological father found me and brought me back when I was 20. Back then, I was still desperate for their love. But I was wrong, because Xavier was already there. Years ago, Xavier's biological mother had swapped us at the hospital. I was sent to the countryside to suffer in poverty while he enjoyed my life. To pay off her gambling debts, his mother even sold me to strangers. If my foster parents hadn't taken me in, I don't know if I would have survived that darkness. Even after being found, life wasn't easy. Xavier had stolen the love that was supposed to be mine. Suddenly, the front door swung open. Vivian marched in, dragging a sobbing Leo behind her. Nathaniel, what is your problem now? She barked. Are you seriously throwing a tantrum because I took Leo to see his grandparents? You know they don't like you. Do you want your son to be an outcast like you too? I sat on the sofa, expressionless. I didn't care what she said anymore. Leo noticed the Lego set by the door. He wiped his tears and picked it up. Is this my present, Dad? He asked, his voice full of disdain. It's not as cool as the one Uncle Xavier got me. Vivian finally noticed the party decorations and the cold food on the table. She looked slightly guilty for a split second, but her voice remained sharp. Fine, Nate. Stop being so sensitive. We'll take Leo out for late-night burgers at midnight to celebrate again. Just drop the attitude. She started scraping the food I had spent hours cooking into the trash. She thought I was just acting out like usual. She didn't realize I was serious this time. Put the plates down, I said coldly. Take Leo and leave. Vivian, I want a divorce. Being in this relationship was like a slow death. Leaving now was the only way I could save myself. Vivian slammed a plate onto the table and put her hands on her hips. You're doing this because you're jealous of Xavier, aren't you? He's dying, Nathaniel. He has kidney failure and needs dialysis every day. He can't get married or have kids like a normal man. What is so wrong with Leo and me giving him some company? I'm the one who hurt him? I asked, laughing dryly. How could I possibly have the power to make his life so miserable? When I first returned to the Sterling family, I knew his mother was the one who stole my life. But I didn't blame him. The sins of the parents shouldn't fall on the child. I was kind to Xavier. I even agreed when he wanted to stay with the family. When I was 24, Xavier was hospitalized with kidney failure. My parents called me, and I rushed home immediately. The first thing they did was drag me to get tested for a transplant match. We were a perfect match. But I was hesitant. While they were rushing the surgery, I came down with a sudden, violent fever and took some strong medication. I remember Vivian slapping me so hard my ear rang when she saw the medical report. She called me a monster. She said I had destroyed Xavier's life. Because of the viral infection and the meds in my system, I was no longer a candidate for the transplant. Xavier cried in front of everyone, claiming I had gotten sick on purpose just to watch him die. It wasn't intentional. But that incident showed me the true faces of my family. My parents, who were already distant, started treating me like an enemy. They poured all their love into Xavier, the thief. Even my wife refused to have my child. We had been married for 3 years, and she never got pregnant. The doctors told me I had a low sperm count. It was only a few days ago that I found out Vivian had bribed them to lie. She had been on birth control the entire time. There was no way she was ever going to have my baby. Leo had been brought home by my parents after they heard about our fertility issues. They and Vivian pressured me into adopting him. I looked at the boy now. The more I looked, the more he looked exactly like Xavier. Your eyes look scary, Daddy, Leo said, shrinking back. Uncle Xavier was right. You're a villain who stole Mommy away. My heart skipped a beat. My brow furrowed. Did Xavier teach you to say that? I demanded. Vivian immediately stepped in front of the boy, her voice trembling with fake protective rage. Nate, he's just a child. Don't take it out on him. Leo just knows the truth about how you refused to save Xavier. Even a child knows the difference between right and wrong. I heard the subtext. She was still punishing me for not giving up my kidney years ago. I didn't bother explaining myself. There was no point anymore. Vivian was my college sweetheart, but the moment she met Xavier at my house, everything changed. That was when she started pulling away. From then on, she only had eyes for him. I rubbed my aching temples and looked at her. Vivian, just go. I'm done. They stood there, stunned. I decided to be the one to leave. I grabbed my phone from the table, but before I could reach the door, it burst open. It was Xavier. Brother, please. This is all my fault. I wanted to celebrate with Leo so badly that I forgot about your feelings. I wanted to invite you, but Mom and Dad, they didn't think you'd want to come. Seeing his fake, pity-seeking face made the veins in my neck throb. I rarely went home these days. Even when I did, I avoided him. I shouted at him, asking why he was at my house. But before I could get close, Vivian and Leo shielded him. I hated Xavier. He had taken everything that was rightfully mine. And Vivian. She had been sneaking off to see him for years, using work as an excuse. I had stayed quiet, but I wasn't blind. Seeing me on the verge of an explosion, Xavier started coughing, acting weak. Nate, I'm so sorry. Don't be mad at Vivian or Leo. It's all me. In all our years of marriage, he had never once called her sister-in-law. He always used her first name in that sickly sweet tone. Before I could react, my son and the boy I had raised as my own pushed me hard. You're a bad man. I wish Uncle Xavier was my real dad. If Mommy was with him instead of you, we would actually be happy. I looked down at Leo. My gaze was sharp and cold. I had loved him. I had protected him. But they all had Xavier in their hearts. The seed of doubt in my mind was growing into a forest. I shoved Vivian and Leo aside. I grabbed Xavier by the hair and started dragging him toward the door, making sure to snag a few strands of his hair in the process. Leo grabbed a baseball bat from the corner and swung it hard against my ankle. Even my wife picked up a heavy glass ashtray, holding it like a weapon. Let him go. Nathaniel, have you lost your mind? She screamed. He's sick. You're going to kill him. Seeing them both turn on me like that, it was the final blow. My heart died in that moment. Why was I surprised? This wasn't the first time they had betrayed me. I remembered my parents' anniversary dinner last year. I had been so excited. No matter how old you are, you still crave a mother's love. For a moment at the party, things seemed okay. My mother even looked at me with a bit of kindness. But wherever Xavier went, chaos followed. He had thrown my parents' original engagement ring into the trash, right in front of me on the second floor. We got into a scuffle. Just as I grabbed his collar, Leo started screaming from the doorway. Grandma, Grandpa, Dad threw the ring in the trash. I found it. When they rushed upstairs, they saw my fist raised, ready to hit Xavier. The fragile bond we had started to build shattered instantly. My parents called me a beast. They said I was soulless. Vivian blamed my petty jealousy and took Leo to Xavier's house to make up for my sins. That was the first time Leo had stabbed me in the back. He was a child, but his words were lethal. I squeezed the strands of hair in my hand, ignoring the throbbing pain in my ankle, and walked out the door. I didn't get far before Xavier caught up to me, clutching the divorce papers. Nate, please. Don't do this. I'll apologize. Just don't leave Vivian. He started to collapse, his knees buckling as if he were going to beg at my feet. Vivian rushed over to catch him, glaring at me with pure hatred. Are you happy now? You've pushed him to the brink over nothing. Fine, you want a divorce? Let's do it. Leo kept pushing me toward the hallway, playing the little protector. Get out, you bully. Leave my mom and uncle alone. I looked at the boy I had raised for years. He was a snake. Even if we weren't blood related, you'd think there would be some affection. But Vivian had raised him to view me as a villain. See, Nathaniel? Even your own son thinks you're crazy, Vivian sneered. You talk big about leaving, but look at you. No woman is going to want a man with your temper. You can't even handle your own parents. You really think you'll be happier without me? Every word she said was a poisoned arrow. But was this my fault? Vivian held Xavier up, looking down at me as if I were trash. Nate, please don't fight with her. It's my fault. I'll leave right now. He tried to walk but stumbled onto the sofa instead. Vivian fussed over him, calling me a monster for being so heartless. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of a smug smirk on Xavier's face. He was a master manipulator. He knew exactly how to trigger Vivian's pity. Don't worry, Uncle Xavier, Leo chirped. You can stay here. If Dad tries to hurt you, I'll tell Grandma. I started laughing. It was a cold, hollow sound. This house was never my home. The three of them looked so right together, huddled on the floor. I was the intruder. Nice performance, Xavier. You should win an Oscar, I said. Fine. The house is yours. My wife is yours. My son is yours. You can have the whole miserable lot. I walked away, leaving Vivian standing there with a look of genuine shock on her face. I didn't look back as I walked out of that life. As I waited for the elevator, I could hear Xavier's dramatic gasps for air and Vivian's panicked voice. Xavier, stay with me. Is it your heart? Don't leave me. I'd seen this act 1,000 times. I didn't care. On my birthday last year, Xavier conveniently had a crisis right at midnight. Just as I was about to blow out my candles, Vivian's phone rang. Xavier told her he was dying and was terrified he'd never see her again. Vivian didn't even put on shoes. She sped to the hospital, ignoring every red light and siren. They were the real soulmates. I was just the sacrifice for their great love. I sat at that table alone all night. When she came back, she yelled at me for being selfish and uncaring. You only lost a birthday party, Nathaniel, she had screamed. Xavier almost lost his life. That was when I realized that expecting anything from these people was a form of self-harm. I was done being my own victim. Suddenly my phone rang. It was my mother. I knew exactly what this was about. The moment I answered, her usually calm voice exploded into a rage. Nathaniel Sterling. You bastard. What did you do to Xavier? He's having a collapse because of you. And now you're threatening Vivian with a divorce? You've really grown some balls, haven't you? I regret the day I ever brought you home. I wish Xavier were my real son. I'm giving you one last chance. Get back up there and apologize, or you are no longer my son. I laughed. I had built my own life without a penny from them. If family is a cage, why stay inside? Fine, I said. From now on, you only have one son. Enjoy him. I walked down the street, the dim streetlights casting long shadows. In this massive city, I realized I had nowhere to go. A car honked loudly behind me and pulled over. It was 9 o'clock. My parents had arrived to check on Xavier. Vivian was in the back seat, holding Xavier's hand, while Leo made a face at me through the window. Nate, look what you did to your brother, my father yelled. Get in the car. You're coming to the hospital to look after him as an apology. I rubbed my ear. What did you say? I'm not a Sterling anymore. His health has nothing to do with me. And to Xavier's mother. I thought we were clear. He's the only son you have. I turned my back on them and kept walking. Returning to that family was the biggest mistake of my life. I had wasted years chasing something I was never going to get. From now on, I was living for myself. My ankle was screaming in pain. Suddenly, the world started to spin, and everything went black. The darkness was not absolute. It hummed with the rhythmic beep of a heart. Monitor and smelled faintly of sterile pine and antiseptic. When I opened my eyes, the harsh white glare of a ceiling fluorescent light burned into my retinas. I blinked, my vision slowly focusing on a tall figure, standing by the foot of my bed, reviewing a digital chart. You're awake, a deep, calm voice said. It was Dr. Julian Wright. Julian wasn't just a chief surgeon at St. Jude's private hospital. He was one of the very few people from my university days who knew the unvarnished truth about me. He knew I wasn't just some lucky orphan, pulled out of the mud by the wealthy Sterling family. He knew I had built my own independent biomedical engineering firm, Nexus Technologies, from scratch in a garage while working 2 jobs, entirely separate from my biological parents. Empire. Julian. I rasped, my throat feeling like dry sandpaper. How did I get here? A passerby found you collapsed on the sidewalk 3 blocks from your residential complex, Julian said, setting the tablet down and pouring a glass of water for me. He handed it over, assisting me as I sat up. You had a severe hairline fracture in your right fibula, a high fever brought on by sheer physical exhaustion and acute emotional shock. Who hit you with a bat? Nathaniel. I took a long swallow of water, the cool liquid soothing the burn in my chest. My son. My adopted son. Julian's sharp eyes flickered with grim understanding. He knew about Vivian. Knew about the Sterling family's toxic dynamic. I see. The police were almost called by the paramedics, but I intercepted the intake when I saw your name on the ER board. I had you transferred up to my private wing. I reached into the pocket of my coat, which was hanging on a chair beside the bed. My fingers found the small, sealed plastic Ziploc bag I had stuffed there before collapsing. Inside were the dark strands of hair I had torn from Xavier's head during our struggle at the front door, along with a few strands of Leo's fine hair I had collected from his hairbrush weeks ago when the first seed of suspicion had taken root. Julian, I said, my voice dropping into an icy, unyielding register. I need an expedited, off-the-books paternity and familial DNA panel. Julian looked at the bag, then met my eyes. Who are the subjects? Subject A is the child Leo Sterling, I said, holding out the bag. Subject B is Xavier Sterling. I want to know if my brother is the biological father of the boy I was pressured into adopting. Julian took the bag, his expression darkening. If this comes back positive, Nathaniel, it means your wife committed systematic marital fraud, and your family forced you to raise your wife's lover's bastard. I know, I replied coldly. Run the lab. Full genetic sequencing. Put it on my personal Nexus corporate account. It will take 12 hours, Julian said. In the meantime, you lie back down. Your leg is casted, and you're hooked up to an 4-drip for dehydration. As Julian turned to leave the room, my phone on the bedside table buzzed continuously. The screen lit up with missed calls and messages. 32 missed calls from Vivian. 14 missed calls from Mother. 8 missed calls from Father. 5 messages from Xavier. I didn't answer a single call. Instead, I opened the text thread from Vivian. Vivian, Nathaniel, where the hell are you? You left Xavier gasping for air on the couch. We had to call an ambulance because of your childish behavior. Vivian, your mother is hysterical. Your father is threatening to disinherit you completely. If you have any sanity left, bring your ass to St. Mary's Hospital right now and apologize to Xavier. Vivian, Leo is crying his eyes out because you scared him. You're an absolute monster, Nate. I stared at the screen. My heart as still as a frozen lake. Not a single spark of pain remained. No anger, no sorrow, no longing for reconciliation. Just a vast quiet void. I opened my corporate email and composed a quick message to my chief legal officer at Nexus Technologies, Eleanor Vance. To Eleanor Vance, Chief Legal Counsel, Nexus Tech, subject, immediate execution of divorce protocols and asset segregation. Eleanor, initiate the divorce filing against Vivian Sterling immediately. Unseal the prenuptial agreement. Freeze all joint accounts. Revoke her access to the Nexus corporate credit lines and housing stipends. Furthermore, draft an immediate petition to nullify the legal adoption of Leo Sterling on the grounds of fraud. Also, pull up the master supply contracts between Nexus and the Sterling Group. Prepare to terminate all patent licenses and financial guarantees extended to my biological parents' firm by the end of the week. Nathaniel Sterling. 5 minutes later, Eleanor replied with a single sentence. Understood, boss. The hammer falls tomorrow morning. I set the phone down on silent, laid my head back against the white pillow, and closed my eyes. For the first time in 10 years, I slept deeply. At 8 o'clock the following morning, the door to my hospital room opened. Julian walked in holding a thick blue folder. His face was grim, devoid of his usual professional detachment. He didn't say a word as he pulled up a chair and handed the paper over to me. I opened the folder. The bold black text on the top page hit my eyes with absolute clarity. Confidential genetic analysis report. Subject A, child Leo Sterling. Subject B, alleged father Xavier Sterling. Paternity probability 99.998%. Result. Subject BIS, the biological father of subject A. I stared at the numbers. I didn't scream. I didn't smash the glass on the nightstand. The revelation didn't shatter my world. It merely confirmed the horrifying reality I had been blind to for years. Vivian had been sleeping with Xavier while we were married. When she got pregnant, she knew she couldn't pass the child off as mine easily if questions arose, so she concocted the lie about my low sperm count. She bribed the fertility clinic doctor to fabricate medical reports, spent years gaslighting me into thinking I was biologically deficient, and then orchestrated a grand play where my biological parents persuaded me to adopt Xavier's illegitimate child so he could be raised under my roof, funded by my labor. There's more, Julian said quietly, pulling a second sheet from the folder. I had my team do a deep dive into Xavier's medical records at St. Mary's, where he claims he receives daily dialysis for end-stage renal failure. I looked up. What did you find? Xavier does not have kidney failure, Julian said coldly. He has mild, manageable kidney stone issues caused by a terrible diet and alcohol abuse. Bribed his attending physician at St. Mary's, Dr. Harrison, to falsify his dialysis logs and lab results. A bitter, chilling laugh escaped my throat. He faked kidney failure? He faked it completely, Julian confirmed. 8 years ago, when they tried to force you to donate your kidney, his plan was simple. Get you onto the operating Table, take a healthy kidney from you to sell or store, or simply use the lie to shackle you with lifelong guilt when you couldn't donate. He's been using this fake illness to bleed your biological parents' bank accounts dry and keep Vivian tied to his side out of pity. Every piece of the puzzle snapped into place. The dramatic gasping for air. The sudden midnight emergencies. The pitiful tears whenever I was about to achieve something, or spend time with my wife. It was all a constructed illusion, designed by a master parasite who lived off my blood. Julian, I said, setting the folder down. Can you provide certified court copies of these findings? Already stamped, signed, and notarized, Julian replied, placing a silver flash drive on my table. The medical board is already launching an internal investigation into Dr. Harrison at St. Mary's. By noon, Harrison will lose his medical license and face criminal charges for insurance fraud. Good, I said. Because today the Sterlings are going to learn what happens when the man who built their world decides to tear it down. At 10 a.m., the peaceful atmosphere of my hospital room was shattered by a loud, furious pounding on the door. Without waiting for permission, my biological father, Richard Sterling, pushed his way in, followed closely by my biological mother, Beatrice, and a smug-looking Vivian. Richard's face was flushed red with anger, his tailor-made suit slightly disheveled. Beatrice was clutching a designer handbag, looking at me as if I were a stray dog that had bitten her hand. Vivian walked in with her arms crossed, her eyes cold and triumphant. So this is where you've been hiding? Richard spat, slamming his silver walking stick against the tile floor. You turn your brother's life upside down, put him in the ICU with a near-fatal panic attack, and then come hide in a private suite, like a coward. Beatrice sneered, shaking her head. Nathaniel, I didn't think you could sink any lower. Your poor brother is hooked up to IVs at St. Mary's because of the emotional trauma you caused him, and you couldn't even bother to answer Vivian's calls. Vivian stepped forward, dropping a thick packet of paper onto my bed. Don't bother playing the victim, Nate, Vivian sneered. Since you were so eager to throw divorce papers at me yesterday, let's talk terms. I spoke to your parents last night. If you want this divorce, you are going to leave everything behind. This house, your savings, and 50% of your Nexus Tech stock. Dividends will go to me and Leo to support Xavier's ongoing medical care. I sat calmly in my bed, adjusting the backrest. I looked at the three of them, the biological father who never gave me a second glance, the biological mother who treated me like a red-headed stepchild, and the wife who had turned my life into a sick soap opera. Are you finished? I asked quietly. Richard scoffed. Don't take that tone with us. You owe this family. You stole Xavier's life when you came back 10 years ago. The least you can do now is sign over your assets to ensure your brother's survival. My brother, I repeated, a small, dark smile spreading across my lips. Tell me, father, did you check the Sterling Group's corporate bank account this morning? Richard froze. His eyebrows furrowed. What are you talking about? At that exact moment, Richard's smartphone rang loudly. He pulled it out, annoyed, seeing it was his chief financial officer. What is it, Thomas? Richard snapped into the speaker. I'm dealing with my irresponsible son right now. The voice on the other end was frantic, screaming so loudly that everyone in the room could hear it clearly. Mr. Sterling, we have a catastrophic crisis. Nexus Technologies just revoked all proprietary biomedical equipment patents licensed to our firm. Furthermore, their legal team just terminated our primary supply credit line of $40 million. Richard's face turned from red to ash white. What? You must be mistaken. Nexus is run by an anonymous board. No, sir, the CFO shrieked. The founder and majority shareholder of Nexus Technologies isn't an anonymous board. It's Nathaniel Sterling. He just signed the complete severance order 10 minutes ago. Our shares are plummeting. Bank of America just froze our liquidity reserves. The room fell into a dead, terrifying silence. Richard dropped his phone onto the floor. It clattered against the tiles, the CFO's panicked shout still faintly buzzing from the speaker. Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest as she stared at me in disbelief. And Nathaniel, you own Nexus? Vivian's eyes widened in sheer horror. She knew Nexus Technologies was a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that supplied 90% of the high-tech medical hardware across the state. She had always thought I was just a mid-level executive working a corporate job. You thought I was relying on the Sterling family name to survive. I looked directly at Richard, my voice dripping with icy contempt. 10 years ago when you brought me home, you treated me like an uneducated charity case. You gave Xavier the family real estate, the firm's board seats, and your unconditional love. You gave me a cold room in the attic and expected me to bow my head in gratitude. I swung my legs off the bed, setting my casted foot firmly on the ground. I didn't need your money then, and I don't need it now, I said, standing up and towering over Richard. For the last 5 years, it was my company's credit line that kept the Sterling Group afloat. It was my patents that made your stock rise. I did it out of respect for the blood bond one thought we shared. But yesterday, you reminded me that to you, I am nothing. Nathaniel's son. Beatrice stuttered, her voice trembling as she took a step toward me, her hands shaking. We didn't know. Xavier was sick, so we focused on him. You have to understand a mother's heart. Save it. I cut her off instantly. I am not your son. The moment you wished. Xavier was your only child on the phone yesterday. Your wish was granted. I turned my gaze to Vivian, whose smug expression had completely collapsed into pale, desperate panic. As for you, Vivian, I said, taking the flash drive Julian had given me and tossing it onto her lap. You wanted to discuss divorce terms? Let's discuss them. Vivian's hands trembled as she picked up the silver flash drive. What is this? That contains 2 files, I said calmly, leaning back against the bed frame. File number 1 is a certified DNA analysis conducted by St. Jude's Genetic Lab. It proves that Leo is 99.99% Xavier's biological child. Vivian let out a sharp, choked gasp. Her face drained of all color, her knees buckling so hard she had to grab the back of a chair to keep from falling. What? Beatrice screamed, looking back and forth between Vivian and me. Leo is Xavier's child. File number 2, I continued, ignoring Beatrice's outburst, is a certified audit of St. Mary's Hospital medical records. It proves that Xavier never had kidney failure. He bribed Dr. Harrison to forge medical reports to extort money from the Sterling family and manipulate Vivian into his bed. No, this is a lie. Vivian shrieked, tears spilling over her eyes as she clutched her head. Xavier wouldn't lie to me. He loves me. He's sick. Dr. Harrison was arrested by state investigators 20 minutes ago, I said coldly. If you don't believe me, call St. Mary's yourself. Xavier's dialysis suite is currently being searched by the police for evidence of medical fraud and bribery. Richard looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The golden boy he had pampered for 24 years, the boy he had lavished millions on, the boy for whom he had alienated his true biological son, was a dirty, parasitic con artist who had been sleeping with his eldest son's wife under his own roof. You dirty whore. Beatrice suddenly snapped, lunging at Vivian and grabbing her hair. You brought that bastard child into our house and passed him off as Nathaniel's? You made us look like fools. Get off me. Vivian screamed, shoving Beatrice away. You're the ones who hate it. Nathaniel. You praised Xavier every single day. You told me Nathaniel was a cold, unfeeling robot. You pushed me toward Xavier. Enough. I barked. My voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Both women froze, looking at me in fear. Eleanor Vance is filing the divorce petition with the state Supreme Court. Within the hour, I said, eyeing Vivian with total detachment. On the grounds of marital fraud, infidelity, and emotional abuse, you will not receive a single cent of spousal support. Furthermore, I have filed a petition to void Leo's adoption on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. I am legally erasing my name from his birth certificate. Nate, please. Vivian collapsed onto her knees beside my bed, grabbing at the hospital sheets, her voice breaking into hysterical sob. I was wrong. Xavier manipulated me. He told me he was dying and that his only wish was to have a child with the woman he loved. I did it out of pity. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, Nate, we've been together since college. You loved me. I loved the woman I thought you were, I said, pulling the sheet out of her grasp. That woman died the day you let another man touch you in my house. And what about Leo? Vivian cried out, her eyes bloodshot. He calls you dad. He grew up believing you were his father. You're just going to abandon him. Leo kicked me in the shin yesterday and told me he wished Xavier was his real dad. I replied, my voice dropping into a chilling absolute stillness. He got his wish. He can have his real father now. Let's see how much Uncle Xavier loves him when there is no Nexus credit card to pay for his luxury toys and private school tuition. I turned to Richard and Beatrice, who were standing frozen in horror. Get out of my room, I said. All 3 of you. If any of you set foot on my property or contact me again, Nexus Tech will file full corporate lawsuits against the Sterling Group for patent infringement and breach of fiduciary duty. I will personally ensure your company goes bankrupt by the end of the month. Richard opened his mouth to beg, his arrogant posture completely shattered. Nathaniel, please, my son. We were tricked. We were blinded by Xavier. Out, I said, pointing a single finger at the door. The fall of the Sterling family was swift, brutal, and thoroughly publicized. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, news of Dr. Harrison's arrest at St. Mary's Hospital hit the local media. The story exploded across social media. Prominent Sterling family heir fakes terminal kidney illness in multi-million-dollar medical fraud scheme. Xavier didn't even have time to pack his bags. State investigators intercepted him at his luxury downtown apartment, which had been leased under a Sterling Group subsidiary account funded by my patents, and dragged him out in handcuffs. When the police searched his apartment, they didn't find dialysis machines or medical supplies. They found millions of dollars worth of luxury watches, offshore bank statements detailing funds embezzled from the Sterling corporate charity foundation, and explicit video files documenting his affair with Vivian, spanning over 6 years. I left the hospital that evening in a sleek black Nexus corporate sedan, my leg cast resting comfortably on the leather seat. Eleanor Vance was sitting beside me, reviewing the mountain of legal filings on her tablet. Xavier's bail has been set at $5 million, Eleanor reported crisply. Richard Sterling attempted to post bail using the Sterling Group's corporate assets, but bank auditors froze the funds due to the Nexus credit termination. As of right now, Xavier is sitting in a holding cell at the county jail. And Vivian? I asked, looking out the tinted window at the passing city lights. She returned to your former residence to gather her things, Eleanor said with a slight sneer. When she arrived, my security team had already changed the smart locks and placed her personal clothing in garbage bags on the driveway. She tried to go to her parents' house, but once the news of her affair and paternity fraud broke, her own family refused to open the door for her. Where is she now? Staying in a cheap motel near the highway with Leo, Eleanor replied. Leo has been throwing massive tantrums because his private school accounts were deactivated. Vivian called my office 7 times begging to speak with you. Block her number permanently, I said. What about the Sterling Group? Their stock dropped 42% today, Eleanor smiled coldly. Without our biomedical hardware supply, 3 of their major hospital construction contracts were terminated this afternoon. They will be insolvent within 2 weeks unless they find a massive cash infusion, which no bank will provide given the scandal. I nodded slowly. Good. Let them bleed. Late that night, in a cramped room at the Golden West Motel, the illusion of Xavier's great love finally shattered into ugly, bloody pieces. Vivian sat on the edge of a stained mattress, watching Leo cry hysterically on the carpet because his iPad had been remotely locked by Nexus Corporate security. Her phone rang. It was a collect call from the county jail. Vivian grabbed the phone desperately. Xavier. Xavier, oh my God. Are you okay? I'm at a motel with Leo. Nathaniel took everything. He ruined us. Instead of the sweet, gentle tone Xavier had used for years, a harsh, vicious voice barked back through the receiver. Shut the hell up, Vivian. Did you get the bail money from my parents or not? Vivian blinked, stunned by the sheer hostility in his voice. Xavier, parents' accounts are frozen. Nathaniel pulled all his company's money out. We don't have $5 million. You useless idiot. Xavier cursed loudly over the line. You were supposed to keep that fool Nathaniel tamed. You had one job, keep him compliant so he'd keep paying for our lifestyle and funding the company. Why the hell did you let him find out about the DNA test? Vivian felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over her head. Xavier, what are you saying? You said you loved me. You said Leo was our dream. Love you. Xavier let out a cruel, mocking laugh over the static line. You think I wanted a needy, desperate woman like you? I only slept with you because it was the ultimate insult to Nathaniel. I wanted to take everything he had, his wife, his home, his dignity. You were just a tool, Vivian. A stupid, gullible tool. No, Xavier, please. Vivian sobbed, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces as the monster behind the mask finally showed his true face. If you can't get the bail money, don't ever call me again. Xavier Snarlat. You ruined my life. The call disconnected with a sharp click. Vivian dropped the phone onto the carpet. She stared at the peeling wallpaper of the cheap motel room, listening to her son scream and hit the bedposts. Realizing the horrifying magnitude of what she had done, she had thrown away a devoted, loyal, brilliant husband who loved her unconditionally, a man who was secretly a billionaire, for a parasitic, sociopathic con artist who viewed her as nothing more than a weapon to hurt his brother. She collapsed onto the floor, clutching her face, screaming in pure, unadulterated agony into the dark. 2 weeks later, the Grand Sapphire Hotel, the very place where Xavier had posted that insufferable family photo on Leo's birthday, was hosting the annual state, biomedical and corporate leadership gala. This was the highest gathering of wealth, political power, and corporate elite in the region. Despite the catastrophic collapse of their stock, Richard and Beatrice Sterling managed to scrape together enough money to attend, desperately hoping to use the event to find a wealthy investor to save the Sterling Group from bankruptcy. They walked into the grand ballroom looking 10 years older. Richard was leaning heavily on his walking stick, his eyes sunken and desperate. Beatrice's makeup was thick, trying to cover the dark circles under her eyes, her clothes hanging loosely on her frail frame. "We just need to talk to Senator Hayes or the CEO of PharmaCorp," Richard whispered frantically to Beatrice as they moved through the glittering crowd. "If we can secure an emergency loan of $20 million, we can survive until the legal mess settles." "Look," Beatrice whispered, pointing toward the main entrance. "Who is that?" The heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. A wave of hushed silence swept through the high society crowd as a tall, striking man in a bespoke navy blue tuxedo walked into the hall. He moved with effortless grace and absolute authority, completely unbothered by the subtle black cane he used for his healing leg. Beside him walked Eleanor Vance, dressed in a stunning emerald gown along with 3 high-ranking state senators and the chief surgeon of St. Jude's. "It was me, Mr. Sterling." A reporter from the Business Journal rushed forward with a microphone. "Nathaniel, is it true that Nexus Technologies just acquired the majority debt holdings of the Sterling Group?" I paused, looking at the reporter with a calm, refined smile. "Yes. As of 5 o'clock today, Nexus Technologies owns 85% of the Sterling Group's commercial liabilities." Richard's glass of champagne slipped from his trembling hand, smashing against the marble floor. "Nathaniel!" Richard screamed, throwing all decorum to the wind as he hobbled across the room toward me, Beatrice stumbling right behind him. "Nathaniel, my son, please." The crowd parted, watching in shock as the former titan of industry fell to his knees in front of me, grabbing at the hem of my trousers. "Nathaniel, please spare us." Richard wept, his voice echoing across the silent ballroom. "We are your parents. We gave you life. You can't destroy the Sterling family legacy. We were fooled by Xavier. We realize our mistake now. We love you, Nathaniel." Beatrice dropped to her knees beside her husband, sobbing hysterically. "So, my beautiful boy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Bring your company back to us. Let us be a real family again. We will throw Xavier away. We will never speak to him again. Just save us." I looked down at the 2 people who shared my DNA. There was a time, when I was a terrified 20-year-old coming out of the orphanage, that I would have given my life just to hear them say, "We love you." I would have crawled on glass just for a single nod of approval from Richard, or a warm embrace from Beatrice. But that young boy had died in a cold kitchen on his son's 10th birthday, surrounded by uneaten food and shattered dreams. I stepped back, pulling my leg out of Richard's desperate grip. "You didn't love me when I came back at 20, I said, my voice resonating clearly across the quiet ballroom, captured by every camera and microphone present. "You didn't love me when I worked myself to exhaustion. You didn't love me when your favorite son accused me of trying to kill him. You only love me now because I own the roof over your heads and the ground under your feet." "Nathaniel, please," Beatrice whimpered, reaching out a trembling hand. "The Sterling family legacy died the day you traded your true son for a parasite," I said softly, looking at them without a single drop of malice or regret. "Tomorrow morning, Nexus Technologies will initiate liquidation proceedings against the Sterling Group. Your mansion, your corporate assets, and your family name will be auctioned off to satisfy your debts." "No. No," Richard shrieked, clutching his chest. "You told me on the phone 2 weeks ago that you wished Xavier was your only son," I said, leaning down slightly to look Richard dead in the eye. "Now you can join him. He is currently serving an 8-year sentence at the state penitentiary for fraud. You'll have plenty of time to visit him." I turned my back on them and walked toward the head table at the front of the hall, surrounded by my real peers, my true colleagues, and the people who respected me for who I was, not what I could give them. Behind me, the security team politely escorted the screaming, weeping Richard and Beatrice Sterling out of the grand ballroom, wiping their existence from my sight forever. 6 months later, the final gavel fell in the state bankruptcy court. The Sterling Group was officially dissolved. The Grand Sterling Manor, the house where I had once been treated like an intruder, was purchased at auction by a charitable foundation I established, converting the multi-million-dollar estate into a state-of-the-art rehabilitation facility for orphan children. Xavier Sterling was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to grand larceny, medical fraud, and corporate embezzlement. Without money to buy protection or luxury privileges inside, he was assigned to general population, working 8-hour shifts in the prison laundry. His fake illness, long forgotten. Vivian's life collapsed entirely, stripped of all spousal claims by the divorce court due to clear evidence of marital fraud. She was forced to work 2 jobs as a shift waitress to pay rent on a tiny 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. Leo was removed from his elite private school and enrolled in a tough public middle school, deprived of the luxury lifestyle he had taken for granted, and knowing the truth that his uncle Xavier was his real father who had abandoned him to prison. Leo grew sullen, bitter, and angry, a living monument to the toxic lies his mother had fed him. One rainy afternoon, as I was exiting the Nexus headquarters in my charcoal suit, a disheveled woman standing near the security gate stepped forward. It was Vivian. She looked broken. Her hair was frizzy, her clothes worn out, her face lined with exhaustion and stress. She was holding a faded plastic umbrella, staring at me with hollow, desperate eyes. "Nathaniel," she called out, her voice raspy. My security detail immediately stepped in front of me, but I raised a hand, stopping them. I walked slowly over to the edge of the glass canopy, looking at her across a distance of 10 feet. "You shouldn't be here, Vivian," I said quietly. "The restraining order is still active." "Nate, please, just 2 minutes," Vivian wept, her hands trembling around the umbrella handle. Leo is sick. He has a severe pulmonary infection, and I can't afford his hospital bills. My waiter's salary doesn't even cover the rent. Please, Nate, he's just a child." I looked at her, remembering the night she slapped me across the face when I was suffering from a violent fever 8 years ago. I remembered her calling me a monster while she hid birth control pills in her nightstand. "If he is sick, take him to St. Jude's Children's Wing," I said smoothly. "My foundation covers all medical expenses for destitute children. He will receive the best care available." Vivian's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. You'll pay for it?" "My foundation will pay for it," I corrected her coldly, "because no child deserves to suffer for the sins of his parents. But as for you, Vivian, do not ever come to my office again." "Nate, do you ever miss us?" she sobbed, taking a step closer, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Do you ever miss the life we had before Xavier came back?" I looked up at the gray sky, listening to the gentle patter of raindrops against the glass roof of my building. "There was no before, Vivian," I said, looking back at her with complete, unshakable serenity. "You never loved me. You were just waiting for a better option. I was just slow to realize it." I turned around and walked back into the warm, bright lobby of my building, without looking back a second time. 1 year later, the sun rose brilliant and golden over the coast of Malibu. I stood on the wide wooden deck of my new oceanfront home, holding a warm cup of black coffee in my hand. The cool sea breeze carried the fresh, salty scent of the ocean, washing away every lingering memory of the past. My leg had fully healed. I no longer needed a cane. Behind me, the glass sliding doors opened softly. Julian walked out onto the deck, holding a stack of financial reports and 2 oceanography journals. "The new Nexus Pediatric Research Center opened in Chicago this morning," Julian said, leaning against the wooden railing beside me. "Fully funded, fully staffed. Over 500 underprivileged kids were admitted today for free treatments." "Good," I smiled, taking a sip of coffee. "That's where the money belongs." Julian looked at me, a soft, genuine smile touching his lips. "You know, Nathaniel, a year ago, when you woke up in my hospital room with a broken leg and a broken heart, I thought you were going to burn the world down." "I didn't burn the world down, Julian," I said, watching the white waves crash against the golden sand below. "I just took back the fire I brought into theirs." My phone on the outdoor table buzzed softly. It wasn't a call from a lawyer, a reporter, or a ghost from the past. It was a notification from my personal calendar. 10 a.m., flight to Zurich for the Global Biotech Summit. Companion Dr. Evelyn Vance. Evelyn was Eleanor Vance's younger sister, a brilliant, gentle geneticist who had joined Nexus 6 months ago. She was a woman who didn't care about family titles, grand social galas, or deceptive games. She was a woman who saw me for who I truly was, valued my mind, and walked beside me as an equal. I picked up my coffee mug, turned away from the vast expanse of the ocean, and walked back inside my brightly lit home. The Sterling name was gone, erased like writing on the sand at high tide. I was no longer the forgotten son, the betrayed husband, or the sacrificed brother. I was Nathaniel, unbroken, unburdened, and finally truly free.